Today's scripture is from John chapter 4, verses 4 through 15. But he had to go through Samaria, so he came to the Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, asks a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it was that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water, gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water."
How long does it take to make the woods? As long as it takes to make the world. The woods is present as the world is, the presence of all its past and of all its time to come. It is always finished. It is always being made, the act of its making forever greater than the act of its destruction. It is a part of eternity, for its end and beginning belong to the end and beginning of all things, the beginning lost in the end in the beginning. What is the way to the woods? How do you go there? By climbing up through the 6 days' field, kept in all the body's years, the body's sorrow, weariness, and joy. By passing through the narrow gate at the far side of that field where the pasture grass of the body's life gives way to the high original standing of the trees. By coming into the shadow of the grace of the straight ways ending, the shadow of the mercy of light. Why must the gate be narrow? Because you cannot pass beyond it burdened. To come in among all these trees, you must leave behind the 6 days' world, all of it, all of its plans and hopes. You must come without weapon or tool, alone, expecting nothing, remembering nothing, into the ease of sight, the brotherhood of eye and leaf.
Thank you all for participating. Well, as today's passage began, Jesus came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, near the field where which Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. Now, Jacob's well is mentioned only this once in the New Testament, here with the Samaritan woman at the well. In the Old Testament book of Genesis, we find reference to a place where Jesus camped before the city when he returned to Shechem. We are told that Jacob bought the land on which he pitched his tent and erected an altar. Biblical scholars believe that this plot of land, which is the same one upon which Jacob's well was constructed, is the same one. Throughout the years, Jacob's well has been situated with different churches built on the site over it. And of course, since the Israeli occupation of the West Bank, Jacob's well has been a site of contention between Jews and Christians. It's a place of importance to both, obviously seen as having sacred significance. Wells and springs have been important destinations of spiritual pilgrimage throughout time, We may remember that we talked about the wells in Celtic Ireland before the time of St. Patrick, and how people would travel to the wells. In many cultures and religions, this is true. Pilgrims visit them to drink of what they perceive to be their healing waters. Well, the Samaritan woman in our story today was taken aback when she was addressed by a Jewish man. There was enmity between these peoples, which the woman of the well would have been carefully schooled in. So she was surprised when a Jewish stranger approached her at midday. Jesus began asking her for a drink from the well, which was startling enough, but then he continued the conversation by referring to the water he brings as living water. He said, "The water that I will give will become a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." And surprisingly, and this is very early in their conversation because the passage goes on much longer, the story, he tells her many things about herself. But here early in the story, she responds by saying, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." So already she's beginning to rearrange her perspectives on life, on right and wrong, on male and female, on Samaritan and Jew, and who knows what else, here in her encounter with Jesus. Somewhere in the conversation which follows, and in her contemplation of this experience later, in the days ahead, in the deep recesses of her mind and the unknown wells of her own heart, she finds the freedom to receive a completely new thing. Completely new thing. She senses in this man's presence and in his message a spirit which will lead her to a deeper source within herself. She comes alive with confidence and courage in the face of it. In fact, she proselytizes or whatever to her own people after this. This woman speaks out to her own people, proclaiming this truth. The water element often speaks to the depths within us. This encounter between Jesus and the woman doesn't just happen to be by a well. The well symbolizes the greatest flow of God's presence is not from without, but from the wells of feelings, wisdom deep within. Water coming out of the depths of a well signifies something far greater. It signifies depths within ourselves. And boy, sometimes we need them, don't we? Places that we can reach for strength and confidence and peace. That can be freed into new life. Our faith calls us not just to believe, though, like, okay, this is right, I believe it, but to imagine. And water is a helpful image for imagining. It's receptive and it insists on no particular shape. In this case, it willingly conforms to the shape of our lives. Spiritual knowledge can never be expressed with the abstraction of words alone, but needs the images of the imagination to come alive, to have a reality for any of us. You know, we can look and we can pledge to allegiance of whatever, right? To our country, or to our flag, to our God, hand on the Bible, but we need to be able to imagine for this belief to come alive. So many of the world's people, like the Samaritan woman at the well and the Israelites in the desert, spend a great deal of their life just trying to get enough water to sustain them. To them, clear, clean, flowing water is a blessing beyond belief. If we attempt to understand this thirst, this yearning thirst, by letting our own imaginations help us, we can get closer to its meaning. The 20th century Celtic priest and poet John O'Donohue spoke of the connection between thirst and spiritual need. He says this, metaphorically, thirst functions as a profound metaphor for spiritual need. It is a consistent theme in the Bible. Like as a deer yearns for the running streams, so does my soul yearn for you, my God. Psalm 42, we sing that. And it's a beautiful, beautiful yearning as we talk about how the deer yearns for the stream. Water enjoys freedom. It disperses itself evenly wherever it lives. There are no entanglements or nets at the center of water. It does not know the conflict and contradiction of differentiation. Sometimes the presence and effect of friendship and love is like the dissolution that water can bring. Love unties and dissolves whatever is caught, hardened, or entangled. That's Mr. O'Donoghue. I forgot to tell you, we're still using his words. Water dissolves hardened things, as does the Spirit. Jesus offers living water not only to the Samaritan woman he met at the well, but to each of us he meets in the place of deep spiritual thirst in our own lives. In living water, his living water dissolves any hard-nosed delusions of human control, whether by custom or law or fact or theory or worldly power or authority. The solution that Jesus offers each of us is not in the form of a final answer. Let me tell you what it is, but in the fluidity of the fertile questions that bring us so much hope and peace. Over and over again, Jesus invites us to wade into the deep waters of our faith. Again, O'Donoghue speaks to this. All life has come out of the sea. The matrix of life began in the primal soup that stirred in the beginning. Here life was spawned. Life crawled out of this water onto land. In the strangely ironic parallel, this is also the way that human life begins. Each one of us begins life in the water of the womb. Each child is formed in this seamless water and swims secretly in the current of its rhythms. In the womb, everything comes to us in wave motions. Thus, our first experiences took place in the water element. Indeed, our first recognition of identity happened not as philosophy would often have us imagine in the dry air element, where a cogito or cogito, I don't know how you say that, but that's from cognition, where cognition happens and might flicker, but rather in the inclusive water element, where there was as yet no separation between inside and outside or self and other. Well, Jesus understands the primary human thirst for a connection to divine spirit. We want to feel that watery connectedness to our origin. Sure, it's emotionally rewarding to be boldly independent and worthy, a worthy goal, to walk forward on our own 2 feet, following our desires, our perspectives, and personal authority. But when life begins to bring pain and suffering and loneliness and deep disappointment and compassionate concern for the tragic lives of others, and it will, and it does. Ukraine is where we focus today. We yearn to return home to the watery, dissolving rhythms of deep connection. We want to return to the source of the river, the freshness and vitality of the spring, which eternally gushes with new life. And when and if we can, we awaken to a new source, brush gently up against infinity, and in that moment become free. Wendell Berry's poem for today is full of several themes, but the one I want to hold up today is lament. The woods for Berry is an image of a place of solace and comfort for the soul and spirit. That's what the woods represents to him, not just figuratively, literally as well. Eternity is not only a look toward the future for Berry, but an eternal experience found in each moment of living. Let's look at the second stanza one more time so we have it in front of our minds. What is the way to the woods? How do you go there? By climbing through the 6 days field kept in all the body's years, the body's sorrow, weariness, and joy. By passing through the narrow gate on the far side of that field where the pasture grass of the body's life gives way to the high original standing of the trees. By coming into the shadow of the grace of the straight ways ending, the shadow of the mercy of light. Well, Berry says that we enter through a narrow gate. Where have we heard that before? Matthew 7. Also speaks about this narrow gate. He says, enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. So there isn't an easy entrance into the life of the Spirit. We must unburden ourselves. Sorrow and weariness, disappointment, and we must come into the shadows in moments. We must lament, and in that lamentation, realize that even in the shadows, we are in the mercy of the light. Well, a fellow named Mark Rogalp, the author of Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, Discovering the Grace of Lament, he explains in his book, Dare to Hope in God, How to Lament Well. That's his article that's found in his book. So I want to read just a few excerpts because I think he says it really well. And I want you to think about your experience in your seat or at the lament table today. Well, he says, we step into the world with a cry, back to O'Donohue in the womb. But we come into the world and we all wait for that baby's cry, right? To let us know he's here, she's here. Although none of us remembers the moment, the first sound we uttered after leaving the warm and protected confines of our mother's womb was a loud protest. We enter wailing. To cry is human. We don't stop crying after birth. It continues because the world is broken. While tears and sorrow are part of our humanity, there is an often neglected prayer language in the Bible for our travels through a broken world, and that is lament. The Bible is filled with this song of sorrow. Over a third of the Psalms, and there's a lot of Psalms, are lament. The book of Lamentation also weeps over the destruction of Jerusalem, and Jesus lamented in the final hours of his life. But lament is different than crying because lament is a form of prayer. It is more than just the expression of sorrow or the venting of emotion. Lament talks to God about pain, and it has a unique purpose, trust. It's a divinely given invitation to pour out our fears, our frustrations and sorrows for the purpose of helping us renew our confidence in God. As Psalm 13 we read today illustrates, most laments feature 4 essential elements. Here they are. Turn to God. Bring your complaint, ask boldly for help, and choose to trust. Turn to God. Often a lament begins by an address to God. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? Bring your complaint. Every lament features some kind of complaint. How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? More than a sinful rehearsing of our anger, biblical lament humbly and honestly identifies the pain and the questions and the frustrations raging in our souls. Ask boldly for help. Seeking God's help while in pain is an act of faith. Consider and answer me, O Lord my God, light up my eyes, lest I sleep in the sleep of death. Lest my enemy say I have prevailed over him, and that enemy can also be an enemy from within, an enemy from the past, something we can't let go of. Lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken. Unremitting sorrow can create a deadly silence as we give in to despair. There's no hope or denial. Oh, everything's fine. But lament invites us to dare to hope in God's promises as we ask for his help. And finally, choose to trust. This is the destination for our laments, to choose to trust. All roads lead here, but I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. More than the stages of grief, this prayer language moves us to renew our commitment to trust in God as we navigate the brokenness of life. So lament is a prayer language for God's people as they live in a world marred by sin. It is how we talk to God about our sorrows as we renew our hope in God's sovereign care. To cry is human, but to lament is Christian. Lament as prayer language is needed today more than ever. The candles on the prayer table have spoken of the darkness of the world we share and the many snuffed out candles of the individual sorrows we feel so deeply. So during the rest of the Lenten season, I invite you to engage in this language, God-given language of lament, and to prepare for the resurrecting spirit of Easter. You might read some of the almost 50 Psalms of lament aloud. They may resonate with what you're feeling in these disturbing times. You may recognize yourself in them. You may feel a deeper connection to these ancient peoples, or to peoples everywhere in our world today, and to the earth itself. You may feel the solace of watery connection to creation and to the divine spirit, dissolving all barriers to God's grace.